Hi, yes, I'm Lindsey Stoddard. I'm the middle grade author of 3 middle grade novels, Just Like Jackie, Right as Rain, and Brave Like That. And I was born and raised in Shelburne, Vermont, which is where I live now with my family. But I spent 12 years living in Washington Heights, New York City, which is where my novel Right as Rain is set. And I was a teacher there, and that was one of my big inspirations to write for the middle grade age. So that time in my life living in New York City and being an 8th grade English teacher in Washington Heights was really instrumental in the writing of that book. Yeah, it's really clear in my first book, Just Like Jackie, because the setting is Vermont. And there are a lot of things that were from my own childhood that ended up in that story, like maple sugaring with my grandpa. Even the setting where the school is sort of, I imagined in my mind my own schoolyard. But even in the other books, in Right as Rain, Rain, the main character, is from Vermont. And she moves in the first couple chapters. She's moving to New York City. And so this is a book really about a Vermont girl who moves to New York City, which is a very different experience for her. And really for the first time, she's experiencing her own whiteness and she's a minority for the first time. She's walking on streets where people's language isn't English. They're speaking Spanish, and it's, the Spanish words are whizzing by her, and she's unused to how many people are just on the street and the traffic, and that there's a bodega next to a bodega next to a bodega, and she's just not familiar with that environment. And so that was a little bit of my own experience, growing up in Vermont. Sure. Then I went to a small town for college in Minnesota, and ended up I was living on 152nd Street, right in Rain's apartment, actually, right on 152nd Street. And so just dealing with those differences, and in middle grade, in subtle ways. So they're the big ways, which is she's noticing her skin doesn't match and her language is different. But also just the subtle ways of, her apartment is in a building where someone had to move out for her family to move in, and that sort of idea of gentrification and what that is and how she's a part of it. And also trying to find a place where you do fit and to find your team in a changing neighborhood. So, she is coming from these Vermont roots, but it's also sort of tracking some of my own experience, having lived in both places. Yeah. Generally, I always begin with a voice. So it's something that I don't start on a laptop. I don't start with a notebook or anything. And for several weeks or months even, it doesn't look like I'm writing. It looks like I'm playing with my children, or it looks like I'm going for a walk with my dog. But I'm listening for the voice. And so with Rain, I could hear her counting, and I could hear her, counting the steps that she's taking. I could hear her counting the people on the street, and I could hear her say, "And that's a fact," or "That's a big who knows." And those are things that she says throughout the story. And those are the first things that came to me. So I knew Rain first through her voice and what she sounded like and her little phrases. And then from there, I sort of think about her story and what she's feeling. And I do usually always pull from at least one emotional point in my own childhood. For Right as Rain, that was when my own brother, my family is, if you know the story, my family was completely safe and fine. But my own brother did come to me in the middle of the night one night when we were children, and he asked me a big favor. And I'm not going to say what the favor was because it'll give away the whole end of the book. But he asked me this favor, and I was always the kind of kid who followed the rules. And I would never, ever have said yes to this, except that I adored my big brother and I wanted to be just like him. So I said yes, and he went off and did this thing, and I just sat there through the whole night and counted. I counted the seconds and the minutes that he until I knew that he was safe. And I felt that guilt and I felt that regret, and I wondered, like, what would this be if something had gone differently? And so that's how I came up with Rain's story, and that's sort of the heartbeat of the story is the story of that night that her brother passes. No, that didn't happen in my family, but that emotion did, and I did sit up and wait, and I had that whole experience. So I drew from that, and then sort of created the story out from there, but was always kind of tied to that one
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to write a Washington Heights book, and I struggled with it at first because I didn't know what point of view I was going to take, and having been in a room with a bunch of 13-year-old Dominican American students, I was wondering, can I write from that point of view? That doesn't feel right. I struggled a little bit with voice, and then once I landed on Rain and her perspective coming into a neighborhood, everything kind of clicked and the story felt honest and real. And so that was great, because I really did want to write a Washington Heights book. And this, I think one of the reviews, I'm not sure which one, maybe it was Kirkus, said it was a love letter to Washington Heights. And that made me so happy, because that's exactly how it felt to me. Yeah, I think a lot of kids are reading and wanting some of the sort of big truths that grown-ups hold. And I think they want that. They're asking questions about it. They're thinking about it, and a lot of kids really like to read books about sort of those big sort of we call them grown-up things, but really they're happening to the children in our schools. And and so I think it's important for us not to shy away from some of those truths and the honesty of real life in middle grade books, because there are kids that they need them. They need these books. And children that aren't going through those hard things need them just as much, so that they can know that there are children that are. I hope that with my books, there are some kids that will feel less alone when they read them. And so that's why I wanted to not shy away from some of that hard, sort of heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But also in a kid way, like she's also a runner and an athlete, and
absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing, is there are moments where it really comes through and it feels pretty heavy. Yeah. But I would say the majority of the book doesn't necessarily feel that way. It's sort of like hanging over it, and then every once in a while gets kind of like the roof, like the ceiling kind of closes in, and you feel that pain and that trauma, but most of the time it's sort of like on the fringes.
I think a lot of kids are feeling, where they appear sort of like they're functioning fine, and they're these kids that are doing great, and they are holding these big heavy secrets. I think it's important to have that, to show that characters can be vulnerable, that kids can be vulnerable, but also that to have the right amount of hope. And so the book doesn't end, it's not a happy ending. It's not like, her parents are going to be great and their family's going to be fine and everyone's happy again. It's a realistic ending. Yeah,
because that's not how life
is. Yeah, exactly. But there is some hope in that. I hope that kids can see how to find some lifelines, how to reach out and find people that feel like family or feel like team, that can kind of pull you through some of the tough stuff. Because a lot of the tough stuff that goes on in our lives, we can't erase. That's not going to go away. But we can find some lifelines, and we can find some ways to sort of pull ourselves through and find some help. I think that's coming up in a lot of my books, actually, that feeling that, we don't quite belong somewhere, or we don't quite fit. And I think that's a really natural feeling for,
it is,
maybe not just kids, but for everyone, we're just not quite, and especially in middle school. I think it's a time when kids are finding out who they really are, what that voice is inside their heart, what it's telling them to do, what they really love, and who they want to hang out with, and what a friend should feel like. They're figuring out all that really heavy, big, really exciting life stuff.
And everything feels so intense when you're that age. It's everything. Like your friends are everything you're feeling is just so intense. And I think that and I think you addressed that really well. And I think that's, and in general, I think authors writing right now are capturing that really well, where I feel like some of the older children's books sometimes don't always capture that.
I had a professor at Vermont College of Fine Arts who, he said, you always talk about why you love teaching middle school so much is because the emotions there are big, their sense of justice is high. The emotions are all over the board. They're really big. And he said, so if you want to write for kids who are 10, 11, 12, 13, go back to little Lindsey. to 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old Lindsey, and what was she feeling intensely? Because even if you were, raised differently than your students, you still have the same emotion and the same kind of like heart, So I would, I think back, and for Writer's Reign, it was that, oh my gosh, that guilt. For just like Jackie, it was like a sadness and a confusion with dealing with my grandpa who had Alzheimer's. Just things that I remember when I was 11 and 12, and just feeling like really big feelings. And so each one of my books starts with like an emotion that I felt when I was that age. And so even if the experiences aren't one and the same with the kids who are reading my books, that I hope I'm at least, my heart is talking to their heart.
Yeah.
I would always say that my advice for any family that's dealing with anything big, whether it's loss or trauma or anything, is really story. Like if you can pull in a lot of books and sometimes it's hard to talk about. I know that in my classroom it was hard to talk about like, this person's feelings in our classroom. But if we read a book about, a boy named Oliver Button, like we could talk about Oliver. And we're really talking about our classroom, but we're talking about Oliver. And we don't say anybody else's name but Oliver. And so I think the more books that you have on a shelf, the more books that you can grab from the library, and talk about other kids in books, then you're talking about the issues, you're working through that, but you're talking about somebody else, and that always feels safer and easier.
Yeah.
It's been not as wild a ride as I would hope, because I'm supposed to be in classrooms and I miss that so much. But Brave Like That is it's new. It just came out in June, and it's about a boy named Cyrus, and he was left on the doorstep of a firehouse when he was an infant, and he was adopted in by Brooks Olson, who is like the chief firefighter, and he's also like the town legend for being amazing at football. And Cyrus is not brave like that. He doesn't feel like he's brave like his firefighter dad, like his football legend dad. But he plays football because he feels like he should, and he has some friends that like love it. And he fakes his way through a lot of challenging things like that, and also through he has trouble with reading, and he's figured out how to fake his way to 6th grade. So he's gotten really good at faking. And so this book is about finding out who he is really deep down inside, and what he loves, and what kind of brave he is. And so it's a coming of age story, and it's I don't know, I really love it. I've got a lot of like good heart feelings for Cyrus, and it has been tough to promote. I had a whole, I was going to go into Vermont schools for 2 weeks when it came out, and then to New York City, back to the school where I taught, and then did a little tour from there and do some bookstores, and I was super excited. But of course, that was unable to happen. But I have been able to do a fair amount of stuff over Zoom, and being with like summer book clubs, and setting up some things for the fall. So it's been okay. I have 2 very young children that have sort of kept me home more than the usual author. So it's, I've been able to be home with them, and that's it's been okay. So right now it's for me, I'm doing less promotion and marketing and traveling, and more writing and momming, I guess.
Yeah.
I have a book that I'm actually done with the 4th book. It's in HarperCollins' hands right now with the design team, and they're working on the cover.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's another Vermont book, and it's set in a small town. It's called B is for Blended, and it's about a girl named B who's grown up with her mom, and it's always just been her and her mom. But her mom on the first page is marrying a man named Wendell, who has 3 sons, 2 dogs, and a cat, and so she's entering into a blended family, and sort of. That transition. It's also such a small town in Vermont that they've never had enough interest for a girls' soccer team. The girls are allowed to try out for the boys' team, and some do, but then they get bored mid-season and they end up quitting. And this is the first year that they have enough girls that are interested. And it's about these girls that are trying to come together to fight for a team that they deserve, and a coach that feels worthy. And so it's sort of like a girls lift up girls, tough cookies kind of book. Yeah, I think this is just a really hard time to be a student and a kid, and I know that people are missing friends, and every family is different, and every kid is different, and I just hope that while kids are home more, that they can look to sort of the people that are being brave and helpers in their own lives, and sort of gather inspiration and courage and bravery from that. And so I hope that they're able to hang on, and I hope that they're able to get some cool books in their house, and I hope that they're able to communicate with their teachers and their friends in healthy ways. And just, I know it's hard for educators and hard for students, but I do hope that everyone has their eyes on the heroes and the helpers in their own small circles, because they are there. So thrilled that Rain is going to be representing Vermont. That's such a big deal, and I've been really, really excited about it. So thank you.